Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Vox, and you are watching some Guild Wars 2 gameplay. Chu and I were doing some map completion on our mains, and ran across the world event of fighting Jormag's Claw, the Claw of Jormag, which is basically just a giant freaking dragon in Frostgorge Sound, and it's pretty cool. We haven't done this event specifically. We've done some other world events before, and I think I've posted at least one or two, but we haven't done this one specifically, and it was a lot of fun. The frame rate does drop quite a bit, but that's not really something that can be helped when you're doing such a big world event. I was originally going to script this video out, but I felt like it'd be a bit more genuine if it was more off of the cuff rather, and just kind of what came to mind. I don't really like fully developing ideas on videos like these because it doesn't feel genuine for something this simple. Basically, I want to talk about what essentially makes an MMO for me, what keeps me interested in an MMO, and I know the conversations we've had before in my comment sections of MMO videos, so all of the Guild Wars 2 fanboy comments can just go away because A, not true, B, there's quite a bit that I'm gonna talk about, ideally, if I remember it, of course, that Guild Wars 2 actually does not deliver for me, and frankly, just no. So, I am not a veteran MMO player by any aspect. I haven't played as many MMOs as a lot of people probably. I haven't put or anywhere near as many hours into MMOs as probably any serious MMO player. But as a gamer, as someone who has specific expectations for for games in general rather, I kind of like sharing my experience, or my thoughts on what keeps me playing MMOs, because frankly, that's, I think, what MMOs are struggling with right now, is getting the more casual MMO player on board. The guys like me, and girls, who play other video games and want to play your MMO, they're a lot harder to get on board when your primary audience is more of a hardcore MMO fan base. Something to also keep in mind in that respect is that since I am more of a filthy casual than a serious, hardcore in-game MMO player, my primary focus is on the RPG aspect of the MMO. My primary focus is on playing through the game, ideally playing with a friend or friends, i.e. in Guild Wars I play a lot with Chu, I rarely do a whole lot of solo stuff. And we focus on actually playing through the game, enjoying the game, and enjoying it for what it's worth, the game itself, not in-game content. That's something I've always struggled with in connecting with people about MMOs and about games like this, is the in-game aspect of that. Rarely do I finish games to begin with. Rarely in MMOs will I reach in-game. Like, for example, DC Universe Online, I put a lot of time into and I had a lot of fun with, but I never made it to any sort of in-game, and I typically don't have a problem with that. The only time I do have a problem with that is when a game doesn't deliver before you ever get to in-game. Now, there have been some examples of this with some more free-to-play MMOs where they're just way too generic on the questing and things like that. And with World of Warcraft, I've tried many times to get back into World of Warcraft and just play through the regular questing and try to enjoy myself, because as someone who has as many projects as I do going on, has as many obligations as I do going on, expecting me to dedicate a lot of hours to your game really requires a lot. And if you can't deliver in those hours that I'm playing, then you can't really expect me to stay around for what's considered the in-game. Tried many times to get into World of Warcraft, or back into World of Warcraft. Despite how much money I've spent on it, can't really get myself to play because the hours that I have to spend going through the main questing absolutely suck. It's terrible. And yeah, there could be some examples of it being worse or what have you, but the fact of the matter is it's not all that enjoyable of an experience at all. I don't think anybody can really disagree with me on that on any serious level. It's just repetitive, bland, just generally unenjoyable questing. This, of course, is completely regardless of whether or not it was good for its time or anything like that. It just isn't enjoyable right now for me playing. So you gotta have a good core game regardless of your end game. Obviously, you have to have an engaging end game, but to me, it also has to be one that I can enjoy solo. And that's not something really any MMO is delivering well. Guild Wars 2 kind of has some aspects where I can jump into some like PvP mini games and kind of enjoy myself, but it doesn't really do a great job. World of Warcraft dungeons and things like that, you really need a lot of, you know, a big group to do it. Guild Wars 2, I can actually jump in dungeons, find a decent group, and have a decent experience. It's not going to be great, but better than any experience running solo I've had in World of Warcraft. So it's got to be solo friendly to some degree. Obviously, if it's completely, you know, solo based like the Elder Scrolls Online, then it's not going to be all that enjoyable at all either. And that was an issue with Elder Scrolls Online, at least during the beta, was it felt way too much like an RPG and not an MMO. It was all focused on having a single player experience and being able to talk to your friends while doing it. No grouping, I mean, there's minimal grouping. No real cooperative feel to it whatsoever outside of PvP. Why? Why would you not have group questing in an MMO? And I realize this is apparently a relatively new concept to the genre. World of Warcraft didn't even have it until just a couple years ago. But Guild Wars 2 really nails doing things as a group, in my opinion. There's some areas it can improve on, but the main storyline questing and all of the helper quests and things like that. The helper quests, the little hearts, they don't really, we call them helper quests, I don't know what anybody else calls them. The little hearts on the map that you do for notoriety and reward points and things like that. I forgot what it's called, to be honest. It's different in every game, but you know, the little hearts, that's more of a solo experience, but it's not that bad to do it with a friend. Like, you still both get credit. The single player storyline you get to play through with multiple people and all get credit for it, or just progress. It even gives you an option to progress, you know, to not progress your own storyline, and that's pretty cool. World of Warcraft rarely ever had any group questing to name whatsoever. Never really had much experience with group questing in DC Universe Online. It seemed to be pretty much non-existent. And like I said, pretty much non-existent in Elder Scrolls. And that's something that if I'm actually going to play with friends, I mean, it's one of those things with MMOs where you're not winning any sides here for me. Like, there's not all that enjoyable of a single player experience. And yet when I try to actually do it with the group, it's also not enjoyable. Now, I'm going to touch on subscription models in a minute, but if I've paid for your game, whatever. Give me a single player experience, give me a game experience, and you've earned your money, basically. If I'm paying a subscription for a game, like the early DCUO game days, World of Warcraft, a lot of other, I'm naming them, you know, the really mainstream ones, but any example, really. If I'm paying a subscription for your game, you know, basically paying to play it online with other people, and you're not giving me any more than a chat system and the ability to see other people in your game, to me that is not even remotely worth paying a subscription for. I can chat with people on Skype and Steam and Origin and texting, and there's a bajillion other ways I can talk to people in-game while playing and not have to pay for it. So if that's really, you know, all I'm doing with a person, to me that's not worth it. I know there's a lot of people who just love being able to walk around with people in the same game, kind of like Poke MMO, where there's absolutely nothing you're doing with the person you're playing with other than standing right next to them. That appeals to some people, and granted that was kind of fun to get to do with Chu, was to play through the game with her right there, and we both got to play the game at the same time. It's not something I'm going to pay a subscription for if I can just go play it. You know, if Poke MMO was somehow subscription based, I would certainly not pay for the subscription when I could just go play Fire Red on my own. There's no point there. Obviously, to me, a game nowadays does have to deliver graphically to some degree. Obviously, it doesn't have to be super hyper realistic if it has its own style. Guild Wars 2, of course, is absolutely beautiful. Lord of the Rings Online looked kind of cool, a tad generic and kind of unavoidable given what it is, that and Dungeons and Dragons Online. But they looked decent, and they had high-res texture options for high-end PCs, and they looked alright. World of Warcraft looks like shit, but it has this kind of cartoony style to it that kind of pays off. The only issue for me is kind of seeing the old content versus the newer regions, and it just kind of looks to me. DC Universe Online looked great for what it was, in my opinion. It could use some work in some different areas, but for what it was, for a comic book kind of game, I loved it. Trying to think of other examples graphically. Elder Scrolls Online, of course, to me, everything just looked fucking brown. Didn't like it at all. And I mean, I realize that's its own style of fantasy or whatever, but that's something... There's a reason there was such a huge modding community for the Elder Scrolls games graphically, because the games were graphically lacking. Even Skyrim, which of course had the best graphics of the series so far and was super hyper realistic looking, most of us running on PC still had tons of graphics mods to add, you know, more light, more color, more variation to it, because everything is just brown and brownish green. And that doesn't look good to anyone, really. Like, it's just unappealing to many degrees, and I don't like it. And that's one thing I've always favored about Guild Wars, is even if the texturing isn't always super high res, it's bright, it's got particles, it's got lights, it's got color. And that's, I mean, that's a complaint I have about World of Warcraft has color, DC Universe had color. And that's obviously a complaint about many games nowadays, is that there's not enough color. Most AAA games have this weird, let's cover everything in brown or gray and dust aspect to them for super hyper modernism. I don't really appreciate that at all. I'm trying to think of what else it needs. It needs a compelling reason to play, and that's something... I guess it doesn't need that, but that's what's gonna... if it has a subscription, that's something that's gonna keep me playing. Is a reason to play. Obviously that involves a variety of different changes and events and things like that. Something Guild Wars pulls in but also does a really frustrating job at is it has some really cool events if you're new to an area. If you're new to an area, there's so many events and little helper things you can run into that, frankly, exploring the world is a lot of fun. At the same time, the feeling of compellment to play after your first character is kind of gone. There's no longer a reason to play once you've... I mean, you can come up with your own reasons to play, but like, the original excitement is kind of gone the second time around or third time around because it's exactly the same stuff. I'm not sure you can really avoid that, but that's something I'm interested to see how it plays out in Destiny, is with all these claims of super dynamic events. If you really want a living, changing world that has dynamic events, it has to feel different when I'm playing a different character. When I'm playing a different spec character, a different character entirely from a different region, I expect the game to feel different. Most MMOs do not deliver well on this. I'm really hoping Destiny will, but we will see. And that's kind of something else that I would like, that Chu actually brings up a lot, kind of, that I like to see in them, is playing as different characters to actually feel different. A lot of games don't get that right. A lot of games, no matter what character, what spec, what build you pick, you end up with kind of the same experience. With Guild Wars, you get a bit different experience, but that doesn't last very long, I don't think. Like, there's the initial, it's essentially you're tied to the initial difference, almost like the shock of playing a different weapon set and getting used to a different damage model. But the game itself, like, you still eventually just approach it by running at enemies and shooting at them and killing them, and it starts to not look very different very quickly. And of course there's the lovely, lovely subscription models, or payment models rather. And a lot of people wanted to correct me on this in my Elder Scrolls videos about what model specifically Guild Wars is. It's not free to play, it's buy to play. You buy it once and you play it, so yeah. That is my favorite model for any game ever. Buy it once, you play it for good. I understand why subscription costs might need to be a thing for upkeeping massive, ridiculous, constantly crashing servers for an MMO, but from a consumer standpoint, they're not great at all. In my financial situation and in the financial situation of most people I know, subscriptions aren't really, you know, game subscriptions aren't really a thing like we can afford. That's just $15 a month for a game is just absurd. Especially, it'd be less absurd if you're a hardcore player and you play that game all the time, all the freaking time. Then sure, you're getting your money's worth. For someone who can't afford to play all the time, who doesn't have the time to, who bounces around between lots of games, that's just absurd. Like, subscription models just don't work for me, and they never will. There will be exceptions I make for temporary amounts of time to buy subscriptions and just play for a little bit, but to keep a subscription, you have to have a damn good reason to keep me playing monthly and keep paying monthly. Otherwise, I've just essentially wasted my money and I have a game sitting there I cannot play. And nothing is more ridiculous or frustrating than having bought a game and owning a game that you can't play. No matter how many copies or how many different versions and installments of World of Warcraft I have, I can't play the game because I'm not going to pay $15 a month for it, and so I can't play. And sure, you can argue that's just being spoiled, that's being whatever, but to me, that's what matters. If I pay for a game, I should be able to play it to some degree. Now, you can play levels 1 through 20 or whatever, but to actually play on my own, limit my features in some other way other than just stopping my progress, and I might be a bit happier. So this was a bit of a ramble. Again, I didn't really want to fully plan it out. I am very, very congested from allergies and trying out a new foam thing behind my mic, so it may sound a little funny. I do apologize. And I do hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please, please, please share with me your thoughts in the comment section below. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
This video was made possible by contributions to our Patreon campaign by viewers like you. Thank you.